So I don't know if any of you have seen, we've done two of these before for the first decade and the second decade exhibiting photographers. And those are on the homepage of our, at the bottom of the homepage of our Blue Sky website, where this one will be eventually too. And the first question that I've asked on the others is how did you how did you come to be aware of, I'm going to say, art photography? Um, what John Zarkowski called ambitious photography, but art
Ambitious.
photography.
Ambitious.
Anybody like to raise their hand and say how they became aware of art photography?
Mm. Well, I'll say,
Okay, Mariette.
yeah. Um, I didn't know anything about photography when I got started with it. I was a painter, and the teacher that I had um, was Harold Feinstein. He was not part of any curriculum or any school. Um, but the effect of spending time with him and the way he spoke about photography and taking pictures and everything to do with it, I came to understand that indeed it wasn't just about taking pictures of people for, I don't know, for any particular purpose, but just to be sort of in the moment that you're shooting and be aware of what you were seeing. So I think it was pretty simple in my case.
Cool.
With me, it was, sorry, with me it was with the movies. I was very early started to go into an art movie theater in Rio at the Museum of Modern Art, and that's when I got hooked into images or moving or still. All the Nouvelle Vague, French Nouvelle Vague, and the Brazilian Cinema Novo, they were very important for me.
Oh, Chris Faust.
Yeah, for me, it was I was in science, and then I started to document things. I was into etymology and started to look at insects and then be able to key them. So it was sort of functional at the time, being able to come up with the species and the genus and all that. And then I was in graduate school, and I took a just a fun class over in Mass Comm with two amazing professors over there who threw a bunch of books at me. And then I started to see Lee Friedlander and some of these other people, and I said, "Whoa, this is very cool." And I just started to eat it up and started looking at pictures and then getting better ideas about the kinds of things I liked. So it was a kind of a back doorway into it, but it took over. And I eventually got out of graduate school in biology and went into media resources. So it's just like nobody changes majors in graduate school, but I did. But.
Craig Barber.
Yeah, I was enrolled in a photography program at Everett College in Washington, and took a history class, and the teachers there made me aware of people like Weston and Minor White and Caponegro, etc. And from there, just going forward, I liked their approach to photography. Wasn't terribly interested in being a commercial photographer, although when I first started, I wanted to save the world and work for National Geographic, but ended up taking a left turn, and here I am.
But now you're trying to save the world by showing us where our food comes from.
That is true. It is about education. And so that's important. But just fortunate to have met the right people to open that part of the world up for me.
Great. Kevin?
Yeah. I went to Evergreen, as you know, Chris, and I ended up in a group contract. I was a painter, pretty bad painter, and I ended up in this group contract, and there were a bunch of photographers in there, and I thought, well, yeah, I should get a camera, and I did, and they all kind of inspired me as to how to approach this stuff. But I recently realized that all the men on my mother's side of the family dabbled in photography, and someone was a professional. So I guess it was kind of in my blood, and I didn't even realize it. But yeah, that's how I came to the art part of it.
John Willis?
Hi, everybody. I started taking photographs in high school because all of a sudden one semester every one of my friends was doing it, and I realized if I didn't take photographs, I had to make new friends. But when I did start, I realized my father had taken classes when he was in high school at the New York Photo League. So I got to look at his portfolio as something that was inspiring. And then it was just playing around until but I was seriously playing. I was very interested in it until I went to college. Every semester I would take one class of photography because it was for myself, just as a way of looking at the world, understanding the world, and expressing a response. But I always thought I would be a psychologist. And then I transferred to Evergreen, and at Evergreen I was doing a internship for a state diversion program, and the bureaucracy there was so difficult for me. I loved working with youth, I loved counseling, but I hated the bureaucracy. So I changed my major and became a photo major and mostly worked with Paul Sparks, but I did work with Craig and Chris and others. And just really, my pictures started being less and less about just, the wow factor of what could do visually, but more about what I could say with people and about people in the world. And I guess I never stopped that because I keep making photographs, but I also keep teaching and working with people with photographs.
John, you were the first person who had taken one of my classes, may have been a student who retired from teaching. I knew I was getting old.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I just real quickly, I have to say when I started teaching, I used to always talk about references of history and sociology and things and I remember I used to show pictures from the Vietnam War and talk about them. And then all of a sudden, one semester, a student raised his hand and said, "None of us were alive yet when the Vietnam War," because I used to talk to them as if they were around too.
When I was teaching history of photography one year, I decided to start with talking about Plato's cave, where you don't see the objects, you just see the shadows. And the students looked at me so blankly. I said, okay, back to Talbot and Daguerre. But John, let me ask you a little bit. Let me go back a generation and ask you about, did your dad talk to you, or did you have any experience with the Photo League? Because in our some of our folks said they discovered art photography through Life magazine, but Photo League is reaching back into a pretty interesting place.
Yeah, my father was somebody when he was young, he just was very drawn to photography and music, and he took classes there. He didn't know very much about the whole world of what was really there as much as he just loved taking classes. And he made, I think, some very powerful pictures, but it was a side thing for him. And so we talked about it some, but it really was like he was doing photography at a local school or gallery, community school, more than, the political nature of it.
So Dylan, you had your hand up for a minute, and I know your father is a good photographer that we've shown this guy too.
Yeah. Also, just hi everyone. It's really just amazing to be on a Zoom call with all of the names in the windows, and so thank y'all for being part of this. Yeah, I guess it's not a particularly interesting story, but I grew up taking pictures of skateboarding and making bad choices, and I ended up kind of losing the battle of becoming like my father. So my father was my main professor in college and undergraduate, Joseph Atone, and has been a really nice compliment to my process over the years, and is always yeah, it's nice to have somebody you trust, you can share work with before you get it out in the world. But yeah, that's I guess how I got into it.
Wait, Christopher, I think your mic's off.
Sorry, Janet was making noise in
There
the
you are.
kitchen, so I turned it off for a sec. Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm Joe Whaley, and I was in the San Francisco Bay Area and a student at UC Berkeley, where I got a MFA in painting. And it's almost the opposite of everyone else, where I was told that photography was not an art form, even though I was dabbling in it. And yet I saw, being in the Bay Area, I saw Edward Weston's peppers in a friend's dorm room. They were, in the early 70s, they weren't worth that much yet. And so her father had given her these prints to put up in her dorm room. And I was just stunned by how you can make a pepper look like that. And it's changed my mind about photography. And I started working at the ASUC studios with really great photographers who were there teaching in a kind of ad hoc way. Richard Misrak, Stephen Fitch, wonderful people. And so it was like this outlaw collective, let's say, going against the grain. And boy, the history has shown that, that early attitude of it not being an art form was definitely wrong, and it has really took off.
Yeah, and being in San Francisco at that time, I mean, there were 7 photo nonprofits that had auctions every year. I mean, San Francisco was a real hotbed. There was a free photography magazine, Photo Metro, that you could pick up.
Yes.
Yes. It was possibly the most photography-oriented city in America.
Yes, and I have to say that our elders really helped us along. Like I knew John Gutman and Ruth Bernard, and these people were in the community and reaching out to younger folks and teaching, in whether workshops or you would just see them at an opening, you could start having a chat. So it was an exciting period of, the institution nodding to the importance of photography, but certainly the community being very strong.
Claudia, I think you had your hand up. Yeah, Claudia Freinkemper.
Okay, so yeah, how did you come aware of art photography? So I'm from Germany, and I think I came across the art photography during my studies of art, of geography and art in the combination. And I grew up in an industrial area in the Ruhr Valley, and I think Albert Renger-Page and his book about industrial landscape of this area, I think this was very influential in the early 80s, I think. And also my father was miner, and I think it was it was very common in that area that people have this book, and that was, I think that was interesting because he deals with the combination of landscape and industry, And that was that was exciting for me because I started with dealing with landscapes and the landscape which is natural and landscape which is industrial created. And then I think in the same way was influential my travels or my trips to the southwest of the US, where I came across Ansel Adams was very, very important for me, and also work of Edward Weston. So that was very, very important. So in my first work. Of course, then I started to study photography, really. So after geography and art, I really focused on photography in Cologne, where in the class of Arno Jansen, and that was really a study which was called artistic photography. That was really very interesting, because nobody would I think there's no possibility to study this today. And then I came to the Bechers, because that was, I think, the Arno Jansen school was more experimental, which was not that what I was interested in. So I feel that was not the right way. And then I focused on the class of the work of the Bechers, and that was very influential for me as well for a long time. But today I think I do completely different things, and nobody would say, so that is really a Becher student, or was a Becher student. But at that time, yes, I really seeked in what the Bechers did, and I still think that it's an amazing work they did, and I learned a lot. And he, so Bernd Becher, really said, go into the museums where you can see Renger patchwork. So he also let me focus again on this Renger patchwork. So.
Great. Jennifer, I saw you. You want to answer?
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I don't know. I'm somehow unable to use the raise hand feature, so I'll just do it like that. But thank you. This is, it's amazing to be doing this. I love the whole idea of looking back and looking to the present. So thanks for this inclusion. I kind of found my way into photography by accident. Not by accident, but not seeking it out. I was an English major in college, and I thought that, that's where my I played music and thought I would be a writer or something like that. But when I took a weekend photography workshop, it changed everything. It was like immediate. That's it. That's, I wasn't very good, but that was my creative voice, and I knew it immediately. And changed everything. So.
Great. Deanna Dykeman.
Well, kind of like Jennifer, I discovered it by accident. I walked into a community college class as a hobbyist, and the teacher, who had studied under Aaron Siskin and Harry Callahan, started feeding me books from the library at the community college. And I was talking to a younger student this week, and I realized the importance of the books to me, because this was the 1980s. I could go to a museum, or I could go to a library and look at a book, but there was no internet to look at photography. There was no Instagram, and there was no way to get exposed to these things. And I mean, the importance of that stack of books, he shows up with Stephen Shore and Louis Baltz and William Eggleston and Robert Adams and Larry Sultan and Tina Barney, and I'm going, my gosh, is that what you can do with photography? And Jennifer, kind of like what you said, I found my thing, I found my voice, and that was it. I went off on my path, but I don't know, if it hadn't been for that stack of books from the community college library, I don't know if I'd be here today.
Yeah, when Martin Parr and Jerry Badger were talking about doing their looking at photo books, because that's how our generation of photographers, that's how we saw everything, just like Deanna's saying. I was very excited about that, but then they sort of veered off into collectibles and some other stuff. It wasn't so much about finding community and common language as I thought it would be. Luis Delgado, I think you're next.
Hi, Steve. Hello to all. I grew up in Mexico City, and I lived in Churubusco, Coyoacán, which is where the Blue House is and all that. So art was in the air. My father bought a house of a Spanish painter, and it was based on Goya's house. So art's always been there with me. And with that and the social traditions that were prevalent in Mexico at that time. And so my dad gave me a Contaflex, and I must have been about 14, 13. I really can't remember. And I was fortunate enough to allowed to go to afternoon art classes led by Frank Gonzalez, who's an American American Mexican from Pasadena, and on the war, on the vet service or whatever, the Veterans Administration after World War II, he was able to go to college at what was then known the Mexico City College. And that became University of the Americas. But he had afternoon classes. So we painted, and it was the first loft I saw in my life. Blew my mind. He was living in that era where a lot of Americans were, post World War II, Americans came to Mexico. There was a place called the Bazar Sábado that was started by Cynthia Sargent and her husband. And the neighbor from next door for where the studio was, which was an old convent. And this was the gym of a convent. There was a New Yorker named Hema who did paper mache. And if anybody knows Mexico City, the Bazar Sábado was a hopping scene. It's still there now. It's very commercial, but we're talking, it was started in the 60s. And at that same time is when the Olympics came to Mexico. That was 68. So strong influence of graphic design, sculpture, cultural events, cultural affairs. So I go to college and I started developing film. After that was the Consejo Mexicano de Fotografía, Pedro Mayer, and that you're playing the state game. So that implies a focus to try to make a living. And then I worked for a New Yorker in Mexico City and doing commercial photography. And after that, we fled I met my wife, Marlita, and we went to San Francisco, which was, you go on the terrace of the Art Institute, and it's just a view that you go, yes, I can live here. So there, so over there, and then it's the Art Institute, and then I did a lot of commercial photography, technology mostly. And then I ended up I went through PhotoFest, which we've just come back. And that place, that system has modified, my way of seeing, of thinking. And because, you go to, every 2 years, you have to turn up with new work, preferably 2 bodies of work. And you get all this critique. Some of it's devastating. It's polite if they just say, I'm not interested, because some of the reviews are difficult. But that's been how I've done it. And then I did a project of photography, which is the Loteria Cosmológica. It's a tarot deck of pictures and words. And someone said, that's an artist book. Well, it's not someone, it was Steve Woodall said, that's an artist book. And that opened a whole other world, which for 20 years I've been involved in. So it allows me to publish myself and other people, and then also deal with the artist book world, which economically worked better for me than being published in a mass publication. So basically, that's it. Any questions?
Right. Craig Gickman, looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah. When I was growing up, my father, was an avid photographer, and my brother had a little darkroom in the closet. And I can remember when he moved out, he was 10 years older, that I found his stuff, and I, decided I'd make some prints. I had some old negatives, and I knew he used a colored light of some sort. So I found a blue light bulb that I used. For a safe light, but it worked out all right because he was working with printing out paper, which is very slow, so it didn't make any difference. But when I went to college, I got involved in publications, kind of student publications, and I was very lucky. There were a lot of very talented people there, but my orientation was mostly sort of in that kind of documentary, kind of journalistic style. But then I discovered Camera Magazine, and it really had a kind of a profound effect on me to kind of see this little different way of working. And so by the time I graduated, I was kind of working more in that direction. And I needed a job when I graduated, and as it turned out, I went to Portland State University in Portland, and it was they offered the only photography class in the city. And that's where I met a lot of people I still know, including, Kirk Thompson, who was a faculty member at Reed. And the year that I graduated, Evergreen State College opened. And there was a position there open kind of, in the darkroom. And as it turned out, I got hired for that. And Chris was on my search committee. And so I really had this whole other influence, and I ended up starting to teach more there. And then at one point, I moved back to Portland, and 5, people, including Chris and Terry Totemeyer and Ann Hughes and Bob DeFranco, started Blue Sky Gallery. So that's the story how I got involved in kind of photography in the art. In the art side.
That sort of leads me to my second question, which is about finding community, which we've had some talk about that. Joe talked about being in San Francisco. Luis talked about going to PhotoFest, and Luis, I think if I remember right, that was the first PhotoFest that I was at. 88, I think, is where I met you, and there were a number of photographers there from San Francisco who didn't know each other, and
that's where we met.
Became friends, and actually 2 of them got married to each other.
Yeah, that didn't
you
work.
want to talk about how that
PhotoFest
operated?
Well, the early time of the PhotoFest, first it was George R. Brown, and the method they developed was one step ahead of Arles, which in Arles, the rencontre, if you went, you would go show your work, but I never did it, but I was told that's how it was. You would open up your portfolio around the square, on the ground or somewhere, and curators walk around and pick you and go review, and then something else. So Fred and Wendy went there and saw that and said, nah, we can do it better. We can do American style. and they went to Texas. And so it's Texas style, it's very open. Anybody who can just come up to the bar and put their money down and have a drink, So, so we got the word about that, and I turned up, and that's where I met in the waiting in the line to choose your reviewers. The old days, there was a board, and they had lines, and there was times and people's names, and you had a little ticket that you'd rotate and choose people you really didn't know. If you were smart, or a little bit older. But most of us really didn't know who was who reviewing. So in the line, going round and round, we'd get there at 6:30 in the morning. And then, and then reviews would start at 9. But that's where you met your community. And it was pretty interesting. So that's the story of the SF9, Chris.
Oh, yeah. And it was Jan Watton and Clint Imboden who got married out of that group.
Out of that, then there was Deborah Hammond, Frank Yamrus, Adrian Bolsiga. I can't remember right now. I'll have to check notes.
Yep, a lot. And a few people have talked about Evergreen, but what about the rest of you guys? How did you find community of people interested in photography? Jane Alden Stevens?
I went to graduate school at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where I actually knew Dylan's father, Joe Vitone. So tell him hi. And I'd say that most of my closest photographic friends stem from that time, not just the people who are my cohort, but the cohort above me and below me. And we were pretty far flung and pretty tight knit. The other source of photographic community that I found was through the Society for Photographic Education conferences, where I met a lot of people. And in fact, just last weekend, I was with 2 of the best friends that I got to know through SPE, because every year we just get together on our own and go do photographic things together. And it's one of the great sources of joy in my life. So those two places were really the main sources for community for me.
Mariette?
I think I met more photographers and made more friends through Harold Feinstein. He would teach he was in Philadelphia. I went to school at the University of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, in painting, but by fluke took a class with Harold outside of the university, and then continued taking classes with him when he moved to New York. And each of these classes were sort of little miracles. And I got to know friends. I made friends that I still have today. And I have never felt quite as comfortable in other communities. I've just come back from PhotoFest and SPE. In fact, I came back today. And so PhotoFest community, I know a bit more and do remember a lot of people from there. But of course, everybody's from another part of the country. And being in New York, I haven't kept in touch with a lot of the people that I knew. So that's another community.
Daryl Baird.
Well, I mean, community has always been just someplace that you could find. And growing up in Dallas, I really wasn't a part of a community. It was really people that I associated with. And originally it was the commercial photographers. I mean, I left SMU with a degree in film and had already learned photography in the Navy, that I had joined to avoid the draft in Vietnam. But from that point on, the commercial photographers would hang out at the labs. And so there was always a group of people that we were standing at the counter talking. And then there was 2 other groups within that city, that was the Dallas Society for Visual Communication, and then the ASMP. And I was a member of the ASMP and was worked on, stayed on the board, did several versions of service in that. But then there was a gallery within the community. There was Allen Street Gallery. That was an artist-run gallery, ran about 20 years, and really was instrumental. It brought a lot of people into town. There was a lot of community that was based there. So the sort of dipping my toes into art began about the same time as another place in Dallas opened up called the Texas Center for Photographic Studies. And they were only open for maybe 5 years, 4, but I was friends with them as family members that I'd known for years when they opened the gallery. And so a lot of photographers came and showed work and did workshops, and I hung work and attended all the workshops because I was just the volunteer for the gallery. And it just was like within a very compressed period of time, I was just shoved into the art world while still trying to make a living as a commercial photographer. And it really became a conflict at some point. It lasted for about another 15 years until I bailed out of commercial work and went back to graduate school in my 40s. So it really was sort of a slow burning community experience of saying, I don't want to be that anymore. I want to be that. And at some point I had to make that decision. So that community, and then after leaving graduate school, teaching, and then the internet and the large format list on the internet and art photo list on the internet. I mean, so there was always a community, but I'd have to say that PhotoFest, I made more friends that were not local or that I wasn't involved with in some way professionally. And then of course SPE. So I mean, it's just been, community is always out there, and when you are part of a thought process, you find people who think alike, and always seeking that out. So I mean, community is something that really has shaped who I want to be, who I want to be around, and people that I want to hang out with. And now in retirement, that's a little bit harder to find, I might add.
Luis Delgado, I think you have your hand up again.
Yes, I did. I have a question. I mean, our commentary, I'm sure everybody's aware of it, but we have a loss of community. Like going to PhotoFest used to have international colleagues, and now it's really highly reduced, and maybe a few of the older ones. And it was mostly young people. And just as a comment, it was I met some interesting young Chinese ladies or photographers who now live in Canada. We used to have Russians. We used to have Chinese, Argentinians. There was one Chileno. That was it. A couple Mexicans. But before there was big, it was an international event. And that's really sad. And what I think we're moving into the world where it is the Instagram world. That's where there's the other community, that you look and you play the algorithm, and hopefully if you play the algorithm well, it'll treat you well. But it's nice to at least say, hey, this is what I'm doing, just a picture. So that's fun. And I hope to see, daily street pictures or whatever silliness we can produce just to stay in conversation, visual conversation. So thank you.
Joe Whaley.
Yeah, I want to reflect on both what Luis, and hello, Luis, I
Hello,
haven't seen you in a
Joe.
while, and Daryl said about, community, where Daryl was commenting on galleries, where a gallery can be a nexus for an entire community. In the old days, we'd go to the gallery openings and we'd, connect with each other, and you really felt the community. And since 2008, I've mostly been in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I still go back to the Bay Area a couple times a year. But here in New Mexico, I want to put a shout out to the Photo Eye Gallery, run by Rickson Reed. Yeah, and that it's like a community clubhouse. It's like, maybe some collectors show up at the openings, but it's mostly the community, and both the books. It's always so inviting. You could just sit in a chair and look at the photo books that you can't afford to buy. And then there's art on the walls, and that has fostered community. And in San Francisco camera work, which was a huge force
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s in terms of bringing people together with incredible lectures all the time. And I feel the poverty of this time where, okay, we're down to Instagram, Luis, and the
That is the animal.
yeah, and it just feels like a constriction. But, I sometimes don't know if it's my own fault for not getting out there more, or is it the times? I don't know. But I must say there
Yeah.
was a richness that I enjoyed.
Claudio Cambon.
Yeah, so one of the things that to follow up on, hi Luis, I haven't seen you in many years. The is this idea that
Claudio.
yeah, there
Saludos.
there's a physical component to all this, and it's centered around the photograph as a physical entity, and seeing the photograph as a physical process. People talk to me about books, going to the gallery, seeing the print, an object on the wall. You're seeing it in space with humans next to you. You turn to the person next to you to talk about it, or you run into people you know, and even, let's say, the relative rarity of seeing images in this way compared to the sort of hypothetical instant access to everything, everywhere, all at once, all the time that we now have with the internet. And that, in a way, maybe we had access to less information, but it made those encounters all that much more special. And so I too am a bit nostalgic for that. So for me, for example, the community happened and was first at university, because here in the art department there were undergrads, but then there were graduate students, and everybody was very enthusiastic. And then I lived in Boston after college, and my friend, he's still my friend, Carl Mestendré, had something called the Boston Photo Co-op, and it was a rental darkroom, both for black and white and color. And there were all kinds of photographers coming in and out of there. But it was just a great place to meet people, and again, physically to see what people are doing, whether that's just a print that's wet that they're squeegeeing off, or whatever it was. And then yeah, and again, the few times I went to PhotoFest or Photo Americas before it was Photo Lucida, that too, and even Blue Sky itself, and which I think for me remains one of the more amazing community experiences, because I mean, I'm fond of it because it was my first sort of real show as an emerging artist. But then it's, you don't just, I went to give a lecture, and you don't just go to a gallery, you just kind of come into contact with this huge vital community of photographers who are, shoestring budget, putting, hanging work, taking it down, showing 20 photographers a year, and it's everybody from little old me to Robert Frank, and then how that was connected to First Thursday, which Blue Sky helped start, and that was also incredibly electrifying. I found.
Yeah, what Claudio is mentioning about First Thursday, all the galleries in downtown Portland would open on the first Thursday of the month, and in good weather you'd have 1,000 people. COVID obviously knocked that back, but anyway, Jennifer Colton, I think you're next.
Yeah, I don't know where everyone is from. I'm not from, but I'm living in the Midwest. I'm in St. Louis, so this idea of community, is super interesting and hard. I also teach at university, which is what brought me out here a long time ago. But so I find that my community is pretty broad in terms of other artists and other people, like landscape architects in particular, are people that I seem to gravitate and find, symbiosis with, I suppose. But there's not a whole lot of like photographers. There are some. And if I'm looking to like find feedback or look at photographic work and be in that kind of community, it's I'll go to Chicago maybe or elsewhere. I've gone to a couple of PhotoFest experiences, and those were amazing. But yeah, community is an interesting idea because it's where like a whole lot of things other than or in addition to it's inspiration, it's feedback, it's collaboration, all kinds of things grow out of that. And I find that uh, at least, and I've been in the St. Louis region for long enough that I know a lot of people, but I don't feel I am kind of hungry for the dialogue around photographic ideas, other than being the teacher of that. Like I'm looking for that in spaces where there's kind of a critical dialogue that really pushes and where I grow as well. But I find that a really interesting question, being in the Midwest here. Thank you.
Chris Faust, you're next, and maybe you have something to say about the Midwest too.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a desert here. We have, I've been out to San Francisco and to, of course, Blue Sky and some of the other places, and there's really a lot of people oscillating around these things. But here, for me, it was initially back in the 80s, Film in the Cities. And Film in the Cities kind of, we've had this history of various things and that run out of money. Okay, so they have a box, they have a place that they show work, have lectures, da 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 da, and then we just can't get the money to keep the box open, and so then things kind of fall apart, and they reassemble somewhere else. And so we've been through this whole thing now for the last, I would say, almost 30 years. Where something will happen. I was part of one. It was called Parts Gallery, and it was when Film in the Cities died. We got all their resources, like their books and some of their collections and stuff, and then set up a new thing. And it lasted for about 7 years, and then it got taken over by the board of directors to become something else. And then they decided they were going to buy a building, and of course that was like the kiss of death, because how do you keep that thing going? So and then it's morphed now, and the COVID hit and things kind of fell apart, and it's starting to coalesce again around some other galleries that have opened up. But it's a very different kind of thing. You had the longtime people like Frank Golke, and when he lived here, and Tom Arndt, who still lives here, and some of these other photographers that kind of were the glue to keep this whole thing to go together. And then things, people get older, whatever, and they move away and stuff, and then it starts falling apart again. So right presently now, I'm in a photo collective with a lot of teachers, and so I'm starting to get into the groove. They've been around for a couple 3 years, and so they've kind of hashed through some stuff. But I've been kind of joining them and being in shows with them and stuff. So we have group shows, and that seems to work okay. But yeah, it's hard, And these guys are in SBE. I'm not in SBE, so they just came back from their SBE experience too. So I've been getting little posts of this and that, and that certainly is a community. But locally, we're trying to do these other things, and trying to get shows, and talk about our photos and critique our photos and all that kind of thing. And yeah, it's kind of rebirthing right now, and I don't know where it's going to go.
I think Craig, Barbara, I think you were next.
Yeah. Over the years, definitely Photo Fest, Photolocita, Friends of Photography, things like that have all really been great. I've made a lot of lifelong friends from those places. And more recently, you know, when I lived in New York, I lived in Woodstock, New York, and we used to have photo critique groups where we get together once a month to share work and stuff like that. And now I'm out in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the good things that came out of COVID was Zoom, what we're enjoying right now. The timing seemed to be to a point like I joke about the fact that Zoom started COVID just to get themselves going. And COVID would have been very difficult as it was without Zoom. And I'm saying that not to promote Zoom, but I am in a couple of critique groups that happen from people, you know, that I know back east, also another one from people who spread around the Northwest. And we get together on a regular basis to be able to share work. And it's a way to be able to, it's not as wonderful as doing it in person, which is my preference, but it allows me to be able to see what work that other people are doing and to be able to share my work. And I would advocate for that because you all just came from either SPE or PhotoFest. And you make friends there, but they may live in Germany or Phoenix or someplace in between. And that's a good way to be able to, I think, be able to stay in touch and to be able to share work and hopefully, grow forward. And my cat is driving me nuts.
Kitty.
And she'll probably want to go out in 2 minutes anyways, but anyways, that's my thought on it. I'll come here. Where are
Kevin
you?
Williams, I think you were next.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, you have your hand up.
Sorry. I got distracted by the cat thing. I have cats that are driving me crazy too because they usually get fed about this time. But I find the question to be kind of interesting because it doesn't seem to me, in my experience, like anybody from Seattle would even ask such a question. I know there's the Photographic Center Northwest nowadays, and back in the 80s, I was part of the Photo Council, which was associated with Seattle Art Museum, but it never felt like a community to me. Seattle, I've lived in Seattle since '79, not there anymore, but basically until a few years ago. And I used to say that Seattle always wanted to be San Francisco, so it was always striving and trying to be something more than it was, and so everything was very competitive. There was never any sense of let's have a community, let's talk about the work. It was more like, who's your client, or how am I going to get a client, or all that stuff. It was very commercial photography oriented. So to kind of echo what Claudia said, I found the most community in Portland, because I had a friend who went there from Evergreen instead of Seattle like I did. So I was in Portland a lot visiting him. And that's when I discovered Blue Sky. And that's when I realized that it could be different, that it could be more friendly, more about the work and less about technical stuff and getting clients and all that stuff. So, and then of course, Photo America's being in line with people there, or just hanging out in the lounge or whatever, and Photo Lucida, that was a revelation to me. But I miss it. I miss it now because I feel atomized again, for a lot of reasons, and it's probably my fault. I'm kind of shy and not a huge networker, so I'll take some responsibility. But yeah, up here in the Seattle area, I think it's a little strange. Maybe some of the younger people would disagree with me. Maybe there is a whole scene around the Photographic Center Northwest, but I never could plug into it. I used that darkroom for a while, and I didn't feel anything there. So anyway, that's my experience.
Okay. Charles Cohen, we haven't heard from you before.
Hi there. Yes, it's a great question because I'm realizing how important at my age, how important community is in general. Photography for me has always been a relatively private practice, meaning that it was just my secret way of relating to and organizing the world. And it's kind of never been something that I considered as a means to relate to other people in real time in the present tense. So my first experience certainly was at Blue Sky to have a real community. And I was kind of in awe of the welcome and the support and the value of just my point of view. It was kind of a rare gem of an opportunity. And
Mm.
from that, I felt like I built on it to I mean, I had friends in graduate school that were all studying photography, but it was not the same kind of greater stage that really has become such an important part of my life. I did participate in shows at SF Camera Work at PhotoFest, which is actually recently doing another decades or retrospective exhibition right now, which I was fortunate enough to be part of. And oddly, I feel like that my community has expanded to uh, different arenas these days, mostly because I've decided to at the age of I'm 57. I was 52 when I decided to become a Gestalt psychoanalyst, and I'm kind of I know, but oddly, and I'm writing my final paper on the way in which the process of photography for me in my way, in my private way, has kind of related very much to the way that Gestalt therapy understands relating to and organizing the world. So I feel like there's two things that are happening simultaneously. And one hand, that kind of it is a personal, subjective point of view, but at the same time, there's so much opportunity to relate to people, just not the one to many with an exhibition, but to other photographers with other points of view that I really originally became aware of through Blue Sky and Chris kind of reaching out. Originally, it was really just a wonderful, amazing kind of eye-opening, emotional kind of growth experience for me. So I just also would like to thank Blue Sky and Chris for just really kind of having such an impact.
John Willis, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I guess I appreciate what everybody's saying about community, but I also, before I went to Evergreen, I had gone to Franconia College, a small alternative liberal arts college in Franconia, New Hampshire, where the photography teacher was John Craig, who was amazing to me. And learned to have community by just relating to anybody and everybody I could because there was not a lot of an art world there. I mean, we used to go to Boston and New York to see shows and events like that, but it was really just connecting with small groups of people, having our own critique groups. Really was not specific to photo as much as just self-expression and art. And there would be often quite a few photographers, but they might be doing all kinds of other mediums as well. And at the time, I was making jewelry, which I quit doing because I got to a point where I felt like I couldn't spend enough time to devote myself to two mediums, and I wanted to choose the one that got me out in the world, relating to the world rather than alone in a studio. But I think I've always kept that practice of trying to find people, individuals or small groups of people, as well as these big conferences like SPE, and also I've connected with schools wherever I was, tried to connect with the community of the school, and it's been really special, and eye-opening to all kinds of aspects of life. And I love having situations where I can bring my community and other communities together, and we get a cross-cultural experience as well as an art experience.
Craig Gickman.
Yeah, I need to get my hand down here. I left it up. Yeah, I've been very lucky to be involved in these, great photo communities of, Evergreen and Blue Sky, and I can remember when I was at Evergreen, there was a student who had been to a famous art school whose name I will not mention. but they said that in critiques there, no one really would say anything, not because they didn't have anything to say, but they didn't want to say anything that would help anyone.
What?
And I thought that was ridiculous. I thought obviously that's not. And then a while later, I ran into someone else who was at the same school and told them that how somebody had said this ridiculous thing, and they said, "No, that's true." And that's so different than the community that I've been involved in, where everyone is there to kind of to help. And when I applied for a photo position, I got my MFA at UW. When I applied for a photo position at the University of Oregon, I had been involved with computers and doing, I kind of fell in love with programming and designing software. And so I didn't get the job. Actually, Terry Warpinski got the job, but they hired me anyway because of my work in computers. And I spent the next 30 years teaching in the digital arts and actually having this other life. And I wrote some software that was, did really well. And but when I retired, I noticed that the friends I have now are largely from that original group of photographers, and the kind of digital side didn't stick that way very well. So I'm very grateful to know so many wonderful have very wonderful friends.
And I will mention that Terry Warpinski has a show up right now at Blue Sky. So Craig didn't bear her a grudge.
No,
no, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Luis, you'd had your hand up originally. Did you want to say something or?
Yes, give me a second. Yeah, you got me out. Okay. Community. Well, it's really, we're getting old to be old farts, and we have gotten to be old. So, getting around, and it's only thanks to people who have a commitment to making community, they make community. Thank you very much, Chris. It's great. It's like that Chris, Fred, and Wendy, other people who are involved in, getting people together who take pictures. And so I have a lot of friends and I speak to them on the phone. Thank God for WhatsApp. It's free. Damn. What do they use it for? I don't know. But, so we just have to, keep in touch. I don't do many organized things. I live in Southern California now. But I do use the social media. And it's a question, there is just putting a photograph as an ideogram and saying, I'm here. And then I love seeing, and then I can go, oh, look at there, got something on the wall, or there's something on the table, or besides and then there's the art, which is great. There's a lot of stuff that is suspect, but that's how it goes. I've enjoyed that. So thanks again, once again, Chris. Really appreciate your keeping us human and together.
Claudia Van Kemper.
Yes. So my main sources, I think they grew over the years with my studies at the university in Cologne, also at the Art Academy in Düsseldorf. But I also I'm always interested in looking at other schools, other photography schools. So Essen, for example. So this is always a source to see new viewpoints, new approaches, and I really like to meet young people. So at that moment, and so the schools are important. Also the festivals. I think it was Rhubarb, the Rhubarb Festival in the UK, run by Rhonda Wilson. That was really a very interesting and very intimate photo fest, where I met really a lot of people which are still I'm connecting with today. So Paris Photo Fest and Pingyao Photo Fest in China, and Photo Fest Houston that too, but not that important for me. And which is also today very, very helpful and very inspiring is the German Photographic Academy. And I think this is really a good thing. We met twice a year, and there are all sorts of photography, not only art. It's completely a big range of photography, and very inspiring. And yeah, you have a talk, and for maybe 30 minutes, showing your work, and then there is a discussion about it. And yeah, that is I think really a good thing, because normally I'm really working for myself and working, there's not that regularly meetings. They're not regular for me. It's and of course just with my colleagues from the Art Academy. We meet from time to time, but it's nothing regular. And maybe another thing was and still is meet museums and looking at artwork, at different artwork and photography, both, I think, and get in a communication about that. Yeah, that are my sources.
Pedro Lopez.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
No, I'm just very impressed about all this community talk and everybody belonging to groups and stuff. I've always been like more or less on my own. I live in exile. I was born in exile, and I decided to move to a lost place in the Portugal frontier with Spain, and so I don't have a community. I keep in touch with Chris, and because I think we have a lot of things in common, and I want to tell a story about Chris. When I went to exhibit in Blue Sky, he invited me to have lunch at his house, and he has a good library, a good collection of books, and after lunch he cleaned the table very nicely, and he started showing me books. He's got a great collection, and I was seeing a lot of things that I would never have the chance to see, first editions and things. But the most fantastic thing was that he put some music on, and he would dance bringing the books, and that was something that I was very touched by, and perhaps that's why I also have a lot of books behind me, but I'm not a good dancer.
Kevin Woodham.
If any of you come to this part of the world, look me up. I'd love to meet more people.
I love Portugal. I would love to go back there. Yeah. I just wanted to say I was remiss in not mentioning the two Blue Sky photo camps that I went to. They were amazing. And as far as meeting people and talking about photography, and a sort of an immersive experience that's even more so than a gallery opening or a party. It was like a multi-day party. And I really appreciate all the effort and everything that went into those. I know that it's not likely to happen again. I would put in a plug for it happening again, but I realize there's a lot involved. But that was fantastic. And also, like others have mentioned, showing at Blue Sky, it's not just getting a show, it's being welcomed with open arms. You know, it's being treated like a peer, you know. It's great. It was a great experience, and maybe it'll happen again. Maybe I need to apply again or something. But yeah, that's about it. I have to say about that.
That might be good advice for all of you. Luis Delgado, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Two-part question. Where did you meet? Where did you two meet, Mr. Lobo and you?
We met at Photo Fest.
Yeah. I mean, those are big community makers. But sort of on the side, I'm just curious. I think we're all facing the same thing: is what to do with our negatives.
Yeah.
And our archives and that kind of stuff. And it's a tough one. So
It is.
It is. I think we're all facing a situation where the inn is full. But we'll see. But I was just wondering how people are reacting to that. Thank you.
I can answer a little of that.
Okay, go ahead.
About half of my earliest work was lost in a flood. And I've since rediscovered them as I moved from Michigan to Oregon in 2020. And they had reassembled themselves in various forms. And so I documented them. And it's still, what can I say, a work in progress. But it's a deconstruction of the previous images and those that sort of made it through. And I sort of had a working title of Discernible Image. Just as a way to sort of pay homage to something that didn't have the same sort of content, same ideas, but now has sort of transformed itself through the miracles of flooding basements. And
Noah's voice.
The negatives. And I've also discovered that I had a tintype collection that had also grown some weird fungus that's gotten colored now. So it's a photochemical reaction from whatever bilge water was in my basement. It's a growing concern, and I've seen others sort of working with found imagery and sort of destroyed images. And I think that I'm not suggesting that we do this purposefully, but I have absolutely considered it. Giving my work to nature and then revisiting it, not unlike Sally Mann digging up her dog and photographing the remains. So, I don't know, but I mean, that legacy is going to go somewhere. If I could have any control over it, I think I'd be happy. I mean, I'd dance in heaven or hell or wherever I'm headed after this. Anyway, just thought I'd add that to that really dire question of what do you do with all of that work, all of those negatives? I mean, it's worse with digital files, but negatives, yeah.
Chris Faust?
Yeah. Well, yeah, here I am with 3 5-drawer file cabinets chock full of negatives, and no contact sheets. I never did contact sheets. So, lazy, maybe, I don't know, ADHD probably, but, I never did that, And so I've found a technique, and I'm going to test how much time it's going to take, using a flatbed scanner and putting it in metadata and just building it up, by year and by project. And, I got to do it. I don't know when the end is, but it's got to get done before then. And it's it's kind of the thing too for my son, who's says he wants to be in charge of it, and he doesn't really realize what that is, and how But I got to give him a break, otherwise you'll never find anything.
I have a comment for Chris. Chris, I recommend digitizing by capture through a large digital camera and a macro. The process is much faster, and there's a couple programs, one of them being Negative Lab. And
Yeah,
that just flip. So you can do a roll in 15 minutes.
yeah.
Try that
And
on the scanner.
I've tried that, but the problem is, it's a page, and so I don't want to assemble all these things each time.
I understand.
And if I photographed the whole page, then we had problems with,
No, you photograph each negative or print, and you assign it a number, and you catalog it with either Lightroom or a database. I'd be more than glad to talk to you about it.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I will say I have a collection of about 5,500 photos by many photographers, including many of you who are in this Zoom, that I'm giving to the University of Oregon Museum in Eugene. And part of the reason that they were willing to take this huge number of things is I had a database. So I think if you're saying, oh, who's going to want these 15 filing cabinets and and cardboard boxes full of unmarked things, I think that's a tough question. But the more you can kind of organize it up, and before you turn it over to your daughter who's a dentist or your son or whatever, you'll be out of the game. Who was next? I think Kevin, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that Daryl started out kind of not really answering the question, kind of going on a little side trip about his negatives getting destroyed, or I guess not destroyed, but altered. And because I mean, for me, I took that, no offense, but I took that as a little bit of denial. Like none of us want to talk about this, the archive aspect of it. And we got around back to that. But for me, my negatives, I shot color negative film. And if I try to pull a scan off of any of those now, I got nothing. It's all faded, even though it's been locked up tight with no light, whatever, everything archival I could think to do. It's only my digital work that's really going to survive. But in a way, I think this is pretty interesting. I've started doing more writing than photography lately, fiction and nonfiction, I'm forgetting the word, autobiographical, creative nonfiction. But anyway, because I did make contact sheets, which is really the only thing that I can actually access, since the negatives are all faded, I can look at those negatives and use them look at those contact sheets and use given images as prompts for writing fiction. So the photo has been taken so long ago, I don't know why I took it. I don't know. It doesn't even stand up as a photo that I would have printed. I never printed before. I can't print now, but it does suggest an idea for a story to me. So I start writing fiction, and that kind of transforms the old negatives into something new, which is to me really fascinating and really interesting. And I hate to say it, but 50 years of making visual art, I've never been aware of having moved anybody the way that I have moved people with my writing. When I read it, every month I read it at a writers group. There's an open mic and you can do a 5-minute piece. And people come up to me and said that I made them cry. And, it never happens to me in the visual art context. So I'm kind of hooked, and I don't know how much more photography I'll do. I may become a writer now, or I'm becoming a writer, but I may focus on it fully. But anyway, that's just a weird thing that happened to me.
Craig Hickman, I think you were next.
Yeah, if you live in the Northwest, there's the Pacific Northwest Photographers Archive, and I think it's mostly negatives that are preserved at the University of Washington. You sort of apply for it. Some of you know Stu Levy. He's, I think, very involved in that. And so that's a good thing. It's also the Pacific Northwest Photographers Archive. Pacific Northwest Photography Archive is a different thing, but it's pnparchive.org.
Pedro Lobo.
About a year and a half ago, I had a great experience. I was able to digitize all the negatives of my first professional job just after school. I was hired to photograph indigenous handcraft in Brazilian center-west tribe called the Krao. The negatives were in possession of the Brazilian government institution that hired me to do the job. I got authorization to reproduce them, a lot like Delgado mentioned. And then I printed all of the 700 images from that trip. I was like 23 then. And went back to the village, to the same village in Brazil in November of 24, and just gave the prints. I printed every one of them in good, nice inkjet paper and wrapped up in plastic and also the digital files for all that. So for me, the thing was finally maybe returning. I love the idea that Darrow mentioned of returning his negatives to nature. You know, I was very pleased that I was able to return the images I made as a young man to the people who are most interested on them, which are the people who were and I met like 5 or 6 people who were in those photographs. They're still alive. It was a very good way of, let's say, dealing with my files. I hope that answers Delgado's question.
John Willis.
Yeah, I just want to follow in Pedro's footsteps in that in recent years, I had just been so sort of overwhelmed with the amount of photographs that I had, especially framed ones that were from shows that were set that I would have traveling around that I wasn't showing anymore. And what was I going to do with all these? I have one son and I didn't want to leave him to deal with it all. So I started also giving the work back to communities and the communities where the work came from, relatives of people who were in the photographs, collections that were near the communities, and the same with negatives too. And it's been wonderful. It feels good. I don't expect that all the pictures will last a really long time. Some of them are in local archives and but it feels good rather than have it piling up in my own space.
Great. Jane Holden Stevens.
I know Bea Nettles, and she, for a number of years, has been trying to place her archive with an institution, and preferably she wanted to leave it to one institution. But many of those institutions, well, all of them said no because there was no money that she would be donating to them to support the archive that she would be giving them.
Right.
And so and I know that that's not an unusual thing nowadays. So what she's done has been to contact organizations and institutions all across the United States and really around the world. And oftentimes they have been willing and able to take smaller numbers of her works so that she now is represented in a lot of different collections that she had not been in before, and has been slowly been able to disseminate her work in that way. I also have a friend whose intention is similar to what Daryl was talking about. She has no children, and she doesn't know what to do with her work. So she's decided that that one day, that day at some point in the future, she is going to have a big bonfire and have all of her friends come and burn the work, and we'll have a ritual ceremony sending it all off into the ether. And there are times when I have to admit that that kind of sounds good to me. Of course, she lives out on a farm in the country. She can get away with that perhaps where others couldn't, but that's just another approach. And then the last thing, which is different, but it's another approach, was that when my father died, he took a lot of slides. And when he died, he had 25,000 slides that he, thank God, had placed in carousels. So I looked at all 25,000 of those slides and I kept some of them. But the rest of them, I went onto Facebook and I said, I took a picture of all of these slides and said, does anybody want these? Can anybody use these? And an artist out in, I believe it was Iowa, contacted me and said, I will pay you to send me those slides because the artwork that I make utilizes this kind of material. And so I sent it off to her and thought, man, my father would be really happy right now. So just three different things to think about, three different approaches. But yeah, I agree that all of us at this stage in our careers and lives are thinking and probably worrying about what to do with our archives, and we'll probably all come to slightly different decisions about it. But I think it is better to make a decision about it before your kids or your loved ones have to make decisions about it.
Well, and let me ask Mariette now. We've heard a couple of folks here talk about John Willis and Pedro Loco talk about the thinking of placing their photographic archive with the subjects. And you've had such an amazing career photographing the trans community. I wonder if that's a place where you would archive your work in that regard. You have earlier work too that's not about the trans community, but
yeah. Well, at the moment, I have this wonderful assistant who I'm going to make a foundation, create a foundation, put him in charge. And this way, people will be able to access the work as they want or need to have it. I also have some of my archives, or a lot of it, at Duke University. Again, so that they are accessible. I mean, not just to students, but to anybody who's interested in this. Well, they have more than just my trans work. They have a collection of things, but the Duke is limited in a way because they will only take documentary work. So some of the work that I have done a lot on are not officially documentary. So I had to figure out some other solution so as not to just get rid of everything that wasn't documentary. As far as getting, I mean, this is an ongoing thing, of course, but my goal is for the trans community to profit from my work, and in any possible way I can do it. So the idea of creating this foundation has been accepted by the state of New York, and it's going to happen. And I'm very relieved about it. I would hate to see having too much trouble with where the work would go. It was a long-winded answer, but
That's a great answer.
we're working on it.
Luis Delgado, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chris. You, I'm having conversations with a garbage can. I mean, I live in an urban environment. I can't burn it. I love the idea of giving it back to nature. But at the same time, I want to preserve what I think and believe in and have seen and created with my hands and machines. So, but there is another venue, and that is the publishings. And luckily we have these tools now, which are electronic, like Blurb and so on and so forth. And those books, if you can place them in a library and they're cataloged, they exist in another world, which is the cataloging world, which is like WorldCat or SearchWorks or other book databases. And you can see where people's work is and find it and go there. And if you want to research that. The other one, which is interesting, is with a website. If you've been putting website, the Wayback Machine by Brewster Kahle, the Internet Archive. They started doing pictures a while back, but it used to be just text. And if you want to see where it is there. So physically, hopefully it's in one place. If not, you just spread it around and then have the big bonfire. Invite me to the party.
I want to say a couple of things related to what Lisa was talking about. One is that there's a wonderful Black photographer and activist here in Portland, Richard Brown, and he was very aware of the fact that the African American community in Portland, there was one photographer who documented all the weddings and everything. He was the community photographer. And so Richard sort of screwed up his courage at one point and went over and knocked on his door. Avery Baltzinger knocked on his door and said, I just want you to know that even though you were just working as a commercial photographer and probably not thinking about this, you have the record, you have the history of our community. And that's really important, and that has to be saved. And Baltzinger said, gee, it's too bad you didn't come by last week. I took everything to the dump in black plastic bags. So yeah, that's a problem. But I will also say that this is part of the, as part of Blue Sky's 50th birthday, we've had 1,000 solo exhibitions, and I decided that we needed to make 1,000 good web pages, a good web page for every exhibition as best we can. And so I thought of that as something that would be great for young photographers to have a place where they could go and study something in a more organized way than having it flit by an Instagram. But as I contacted the photographers, a lot of you guys sort of said, whoa, you're going to take on some of my legacy burden? Great. So I thought of it originally for young photographers, but it's actually pretty useful for old photographers. I mean, some of the web pages that we've made for past shows have 100 images on them, and an artist statement, a book, an interview, a link to the artist's website for as long as that exists. I mean, it'd be nice if you have a good website, figure out how that's going to keep living longer than you.
Internet Archive.
But yeah, I think there's a way in which what Luis is saying is if you get a book out there into the world, it's a message in a bottle. That we showed a photographer from Argentina, Oscar Pintor, and I found his book in a bookstore in Guatemala. And we had some other photographers from Argentina that we've shown. And I asked one of them, do you know this guy? And he said, oh, yes, he and Juan Travnik are the two teachers who taught all of us. And he'd had a show in Paris, and he'd had shows in Argentina and maybe somewhere else in South America. I don't remember. But he hadn't shown anywhere or had a book anywhere where we could have seen it. So I was happy to find it. And that really kind of, brought his work out into the world in a way that his prints and his negatives and things couldn't. Daryl. Baird, you
Yeah,
had your hand up.
I thought I would mention that again. Rickson Reed tried and is, as far as I know, still maintaining the Art Photo Index. I'm looking at it on another screen right now. A lot of photographers there. I used it in teaching for people to go and look at work. There's a lot of photographers there. It's a very slow database. I'm sure that Rickson's computing skills probably could use an upgrade, but
It's old software.
yeah, and old HTML is not good HTML, whatever it is. I'm not a computer tech person. I use the computer, but anyway, it's just one of those attempts to really broaden and codify really everything that's been done over a period of time, but it's not really historical. It's kind of like what we're talking about. It's a span of time, maybe 20 years, 30 years, and work that has been through PhotoEye, through the galleries, through whatever else. Rickson was really active trying to promote photography. They did just a bang up job, but it's monumental. I mean, it's a huge, huge issue of the thousands, millions, billions of photographers and photo images that are out there, and how do we make sense of that? And for ourselves, it's what to do with that. And just as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about different kind of ways to destroy my images and document that. So, it's never-ending process of
decomposition.
Yeah, decomposition. No, I've already done that one. It's another series.
So we got about another 20 minutes. I know you have your hand up, Kevin, but let me kind of switch to, I wanted to ask about the sort of photography as the generation that most of us in. Dylan is a generation younger. But even so, I mean, there's the sort of, I was alluding earlier to the photographers, young photographers now who are basically have Instagram as a way of communicating, and us old geezers who don't really dig that. But how do you see this sort of generation gap in photography in terms of obviously technical things, but also perceptual, conceptual differences? Do you see something interesting there? Claudio Cambon.
I think it's interesting. A friend of mine has helped a family from Afghanistan get to the US, and there's a bunch of girls in the family, and she's sort of took them all under her wing when the parents couldn't, and has gotten them into university. And Gohar, who's now a sophomore at Earlham College in Indiana, she wanted to take a black and white photo class. And so Mary asked me, okay, where can I get a camera? Because if you just look for Pentax K1000, they cost $400. But so a friend of mine who has a bunch of old cameras, we got her one, and she just loves it. And I was initially, in general, in thinking about sort of the quote unquote the younger generation as some sort of monolithic block, thinking, oh, they just use pictures performatively and not as sort of memory tools the way we predominantly did, as a repository of a thing. And even though that too is a little bit performative. And in reality, or if I look at my stepdaughters and how they traffic in images, but I also notice that they actually hold on to images. And as I was mentioning earlier, I have this big issue about how the materiality of photographs, their physical reality, does a lot more for us, at least for me, than it does just seeing it on a screen. I think the screen is sort of Stalinist. It makes everything sort of equal at a low level, whether it's a great photograph or a picture of an airplane meal. And I end up not remembering anything, but I open a book and I see a picture, I remember it. And so all of that to say that I have this fear that the younger generation is not retaining anything, and yet they are. And I think that one of the things that matters are that when kids take photography classes, they are presumably being taught how to edit their work, how to hew it down to that essential core to sort of amputate out the pictures at the very end that they think are good, and then they realize they're finally not. And as long as schools still cultivate that practice, I feel like that there's hope for the medium, that there's a sense of permanence, that it doesn't become overly disposable. And so that's why I still have hope that we'll still kind of gravitate to the idea of a photograph as, yes, being this sort of like wonderful, splashy now that you can send to your friends all over the world, but at the same time that people look at it and they're very attached to it because it connects them to a certain moment in time.
Joe Whaley?
Yeah, Claudio, I really read what you said resonates with me quite a bit. And one thing that I would say, just put a label to what you said, is that we want visual literacy, right? And I think all of us who have been teachers, that was our main job, is to teach visual literacy, where your students might become, cameramen on a film scene, a set. It didn't really matter that they would go off and be fine art photographers, but just an appreciation of the world and seeing more clearly and being able to edit it. And one thing I want to clarify, I think, for the generational gap is that I could tell all of us are of an age where we're of a generation where we came into photography in an analog way, where we're making, photographing was hard to photograph. I used a view camera. Hard to do that. And you had to have a lot of technical skills. Then you're in the darkroom, et cetera, et cetera. And the generation behind us is all digital. And we're maybe the only generation where we have 1 foot in the analog world and 1 foot in the digital world. And that's only going to happen once, where you learn that way and transition into the digital way. And I think it's a different way of seeing that, the immediacy of the digital cameras and how you really don't need to know a lot technically. It has its pluses and its minuses. And if you're using a 4x5 or 8x10 view camera, it slows you way down, and you study the image before you put that expensive piece of film in there. And on the flip side, the digital, you could experiment, and I do that now. I just experiment like crazy, and the delete button's wonderful. And you just pick out what you really want. And so there are two different mediums, really. And I think that needs to be recognized and appreciated. And
Jennifer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I've been impressed with my students. We have a black and white, analog everything as well as digital. And the students are really interested in both. I mean, I've been impressed that they are very interested and facile at having their feet in both places all at once. And they're really conscious of, how images are everywhere all the time and this need to sort through that. But they are also really hungry for slowing down. And as a student who they found a flip phone and decided that they were gonna, they were just so wanting something that allowed this slowing down. But yeah, I think students now are, 20-year-olds have had this digital world from the time they were born. And I've just been really impressed at their sophistication with being able to sort a lot of that out. So I don't really have a pessimistic view. I mean, I think it is harder to be to be careful about all of the information, but I don't think that's I mean, it's different because it's more, but I don't think it's so different. I think it's just always been with us, but it just seems, yeah, I'm really curious and impressed with how young people are navigating in all ways, digitally, analog, physical, desiring, slowing down while also being at this fast pace. It's a hard thing to balance, but I'm kind of hopeful.
Great. John Lewis, you had your hand up. Did you have something you want to say?
Oh, well, some of what I was going to say, Jennifer has said, so I won't just repeat it because I appreciated what she said. But I also, as part of it, starting in an analog day and age, I think there was something about always knowing that photography wasn't truth. Photographers could manipulate situations by what they photographed, how they framed it, when they took the pictures. And then there was obviously all the different ways we could change things with the darkroom and film adjustments and everything else. And then the context of how you put images together and text and all that. But I think there was still something really special in a lot of people's imagery and making of images with this playing with language about an observation of the world. And I think about that in relationship to AI now and how different it is talking with students sometimes about how, they could go and they could take a picture and they could just within seconds, they could just pull people out of the pictures and get rid of them. And not that we couldn't do that before, and not that that wasn't happening in photography since the invention of the medium, but it took a different intentionality and different, I don't know, I just feel like there's a difference with how people think of images as being a language about the world or made up.
Mariette, Patty Allen?
Yeah, all three of them. I think that a lot of students or young people are really tired of just pushing and pressing little things and are really interested in handmade physical activity to do with photography. And there seems to me greater and greater interest in trying different materials and techniques and physical relationship to art rather than just using your fingertips.
Kevin, I think you've been waiting.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate what Mariette was just saying. I hope that's the case with a lot of people. I'm sorry, I've forgotten who just spoke about AI, but when I heard that, I realized that I met a guy who was a commercial photographer here in Tacoma, and he told me he had a job for a while working for Amazon, writing prompts to get AI to create commercial photographs that I don't know how they were using them. He didn't get into what the content was or anything, but he said it was a very soul-crushing job and he couldn't do it for very long. But that just freaked me out completely because when you take away all the even the digital process, which is very streamlined compared to the analog processes that most of us started out with, I don't know what you got left. I guess you got something new, and I guess I could open my mind to it, but wow, that blew my mind.
Claudia, you had your hand up?
Yes. So I absolutely agree with Mariette, and think young photographers also in Germany, in Europe, everywhere, appreciate the materiality. So what Mariette said, the physical thing of photography, and also I see that young people like the magic or the magical process in the darkroom. They really appreciate that, and also to use camera with film. So make film-based photographs for the authenticity. Of course, there is the digital impact is there, and they are flooded with images, of course. But I think they want to. I think they want to slow down, and they want to have the magical thing as well.
Dylan Bertoni, your hand was sort of up and down. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess we make we all make pictures for different reasons, but for me, I guess going into community and photographing people that I didn't understand somehow was an attempt to kind of further my understanding of the world and make myself a better place. And I don't know that people are not using, photography the exact same way now. I really resonated with what Jennifer said, just like the students' engagement with kind of image making now. It feels alive and it feels kind of, it's fun. And there's been a democratization of whose stories are being told. And sometimes that can hurt because maybe possibly too many stories about coffee cups are being told. But I think that there's an interest in making connections the same way that I've always made connections. It always becomes, there's a lot lower barriers in entering into it. Oftentimes it's just so expensive to make photographs, and now people can go have experiences and share those and make connections. And I think that's kind of alive and full of life at this point.
I'll also mention that you make pictures with extreme aspect ratios that don't lend themselves to digital reproduction very well. You need a long wall.
It doesn't work at all for mine, but it's all right. It's good for everybody else.
Let's see who is next. I think Jane Olden Stevens. I'm saying your whole names because we see the names on the screen, but in the taping, I think they disappear. So that's why I'm saying your names.
Yeah, I had an experience recently that speaks to what Jennifer, really the last four speakers have addressed. I was invited to talk to 2 communication design classes at the university, and we were taught, and it turns out they had experience both with digital as well as analog photography. And as we were discussing their various merits, that whole issue, that word magic came up. Magic in photography, or the magic of photography. And I said, I've struggled ever since the digital world came into play with having the same kind of magical experience that I had when every time that I'd see a print come up in the developer in the darkroom, that just was an aha moment, sometimes of horror and sometimes of glee. But I've struggled to find that same sense of awe and magic in the digital realm. Have any of you students experienced that? Not one hand went up. And I said, and how many of you have experienced that when you've been doing analog photography? And every hand went up. And I said, well, I'm hoping that you're the generation that will discover how to create that magical experience in the digital world, because it's got to be there somewhere for somebody. And I'm counting on you to get that. I really do hope that happens for people because, digital is everywhere now. I use it every day. And but I personally am still searching, and I'm hoping that the next generation gets there for me.
Probably AI.
Maybe.
John Willis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with what people are saying. I didn't mean at all to knock digital or the contemporary. I actually love digital and analog, and what Mariette said, I think it was Mariette talking about different ways that people work, and the creativity that's going on now. I think Jennifer said it also, but it takes me back to, say, the 70s when work was getting more and more consistent, and a lot of people started going back to 19th century processes. I think that there's all kinds of interesting ways of the work developing and the crossing between analog and digital and so forth. I'm a little perplexed where AI comes in and where it will go, but I think it will probably go somewhere in interesting ways. I'm a little less trusting for myself with my work, how AI changes the way we think about work that's being made, or how others will think about it. But I hope that it'll find its realm, and that I'll end up really appreciating it more and more too. But I as far as digital and analog, I look at them as different tools, and there's exciting things being done with both, I think.
Craig Barber.
And last thing I just want to say, I love it when
go.
people mix the two. Sorry.
Right. Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about these issues a while back and about how basically most photographs, 99 point who knows what percent of photographs people see are on a screen, and it also means that as a photographer, an artist, you sort of give up this whole end part of the process that we used to have control of, and the materiality. And then it occurred to me, well, actually, ironically, photography did that to painting and sculpture kind of in the 19th century. That most people, the paintings you see are not the real paintings, they're photographs of paintings. Certainly art history. Someone said photography invented art history. So there's a bit of an irony there.
Craig Barber.
Yeah, a couple things. For those of you who have students who would like to slow things down, I would suggest a cardboard box. I worked with, it doesn't get much slower than working with Pinhole.
No.
And I coupled that with alternative processes as well. Having said that, I switched over to digital in 2020, after over 20 years of, working with pinholes and that. And one thing I really like about digital is spontaneity. There is no spontaneity working with a digital or with an 8x10. I mean, just got to park it, which is great, but it's kind of nice to be able to just react to the moment as quickly as I can with the digital. I mean, there's upside to both, to be sure, but they want to slow down. The pinhole camera will do it for them, and if they want to slow it down even more, use paper for a negative. So,
well, and I do also think that's a very important observation when you were saying earlier that the young photographers are interested in sort of making a physicality, making photo sculpture, and doing things that are not flat screens, that are more sort of experimental rather than straight photography, but with a physicality of an object as an important ingredient. Luis Delgado.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm just making a note.
Hiding under your desk.
Yeah, I'm here. Well, going with the magic of making images for a digital world, I am sure it's there. I'm obviously not going to get there, but we'll see. But if you have any understanding of or have had any interaction with that world, it's the prompts. So it's what you put into it, and you get, it's the poetic of, it's like writing a photograph, creating an image, not a photograph, an image through your language. So it's the poetics of the prompts. So, but that is one way that's going to be. I think that I've seen a few of them. I'm not enthralled with them, but they're going to come up with that. The other thing is I'm going to say adieu. Thank you very much for everything. My kiddies are having a revolution out there. It's dinner time. So thank you very much.
Yep. And I think it's time to wrap up for all of us. Claudia and Pedro, I think you've been very brave. It's with 3.
That's 2 in the morning.
I think.
Yeah.
For all participating in this, and we have 2 more that we'll be doing for our 4th decade and 5th decade shows. And like I say, the 1st and 2nd decade ones are at the bottom of our Blue Sky homepage. So if you get curious about what do those other goofballs say.
Thank you for
Thank you so much.
doing this.
Thank
you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for all
to
your
meet you
engagement.
all.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you, Chris, for Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Keep on
what
dancing.
I like to say is Blue Sky is the microphone and you guys are the singers. So We got to do our job because you do
You're
your
the
job. So good.
dancer.
But you're holding up the sky.
There we go.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
I know.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Adios.